be your we will be your moderators for today's session. As a reminder, the session is being recorded. All recordings will be available to you through the app for 3 months following the conference. As you watch this session, we ask that you please use the Whova engagement features, not the Zoom engagement features. If you look to the right side of your screen under the sponsor level, there are tabs for Q&A where we'll take questions, polls, chat, and community. Please use all of these features during our session today. We will come back to the Q&A at the end. All participants are muted and cannot unmute unless the presenter or the host unmutes you. You can also select live transcription is available on the center of your screen right below the visuals for live audio captioning and the full transcript of today's session. Please also note the Take Notes feature under the session title. You can store your own notes and ideas from the session here. Your notes are only yours and will not appear on anyone else's screen. When the session is over, we please ask that you go to the conference evaluation form and provide feedback on how the session went. I will also put this link in the chat and we'll add it again at the end of the session. If you are applying for CEs, you must complete your evaluations. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly. And with that, let me please introduce our wonderful speaker. Stacy Lefevers, PhD, MPH, RN, is a research scientist at Virginia Commonwealth University, where she studies human trafficking, gender-based violence, and the prevention of education sexual misconduct in K through 12 schools. Take it away, Stacy.
Hey, Nora, thanks so much for that. Let me go ahead and share my slides. All right, and I think you all can see that. Okay, perfect. All right, again, my name is Stacy. Thanks so much for being here today. I wanted to give a quick content note and reminder that this presentation covers topics such as trafficking, sex work, and coercive relationships. So please always take care of yourself in the ways that you need. For some background, colleges and universities typically don't routinely measure prevalence of sex trafficking or sex work on campus climate surveys, but there are a number of reasons why college students may be vulnerable to trafficking or exploitation. First, the sheer financial burden of college is one issue that can come up. Second, this is a transitional period that can bring up mental health challenges. And then there is the fact that students are already at very high risk for sexual violence. So at VCU, Dr. Conley conducted a campus climate survey in 2018 that found that 2% of grad students and 3% of undergrads reported experiences while in college that meet the definition of sex trafficking. When I began this study in 2022, we were still learning about the impact of COVID on trafficking. So I was interested to see if that particular context could have any impact on survey responses. At the time, we were learning that there was a bit of an increase in online trafficking recruitment during lockdown, which basically means that those who were recruiting people into trafficking were adapting to the lockdown environment. We also saw an increase in intimate partner recruitment during this time. And during general times, not COVID times, we do see about 40% of trafficking survivors, they have been recruited into trafficking by their intimate partners. So, for my study, the primary goal was to gain a clear understanding of what sexual exploitation entails within a college setting. So, to achieve this, I used a mixed method design focusing on two main objectives. The first is measure prevalence, and this involved using an existing campus survey about mental health, trauma, and substance use, because right now my campus is not currently conducting a campus climate survey. And then objective two, I used purposive sampling to invite individuals who had had these types of experiences to participate in one-on-one interviews. And that is really where I hope to get at some of the nuances between what might be considered exploitation and consensual sex work and how students are defining that for themselves. These were the major findings of the questions asked, and demographically, the majority of the eligible sample, meaning the 150 who were eligible for an interview, they identified as cisgender women, non-white, LGBTQ with an average age of 21 years old. Those demographics were roughly the same among my interview group. And usually, campus violence work, we see straight white young women represented. But in this case, the folks I got to interview were majority non-white and not straight. So interestingly, compared to 2019 and 2024, 6% of undergrads reported participating in arrangement relationships or sugar dating relationships, a slight increase from 2019. And then 5.5 reported experiences that met the definition of sex trafficking. And that was up from 2019 at 3%. So these are the major themes that came out of the interviews. Glamorization came from the idealized picture of sugar dating that participants saw on social media versus the reality of actually trying it out or hearing stories of friends who did. Social media portrayals of sugar dating were described as too good to be true and portrayed it as a lifestyle choice rather than a side job. And that's where some of the students mentioned a rebranding of that activity. They were also seeing tutorials online for how to get into this lifestyle. And even though it was described as too good to be true, people reported seeing the appeal of trying it out. Commodification. This theme arose from participants' awareness of their inherent financial opportunities through either camming or live streaming, selling photos, or sugar dating. Overall, the primary motivator for participants to sell images or try sugar dating was financial insecurity. It became clear that economic hardship was the driving force between these transactions. In some examples, financial insecurity was defined as someone who is in need of short-term spending money, but others described having friends without stable housing or access to food. And then when people were using these payments from selling images or sugar dating to fund their basic needs, they found that their autonomy occasionally became limited. One participant's anonymity was compromised when selling pictures and camming. The buyer used the student's real identity as blackmail to force the student into recording acts that they previously refused to. So, this theme of a method of control started to display a possible slippery slope where something that began as lucrative and empowering then unfortunately turned into something that was forced. This theme also touched on coercive sexual relationships that students didn't know how to get out of, and even academic coercion on the part of a teaching assistant. While these situations might not meet the definition of sex trafficking, those interviews highlighted controlling and violent behaviors that no one should have to face. Ultimately, participants expressed what they wished they had known prior to these experiences, as this knowledge would have better equipped them to navigate these situations. Their needs were varied but fairly basic and range from sex ed to guaranteed housing on campus. Um, Sex ed, particularly touching on healthy relationships, consent, and IPV, would address some of the issues that the students were describing. Online communication safety was something that emerged between the lines of the interviews as students described their approach to online safety as trial and error or something learned along the way. They could really do with some more open dialogue on internet privacy and security, as those things seem to be causing a lot of anxiety for them. And then having basic needs met, like guaranteed housing and food assistance, would reduce the risk for violence for someone who had to turn to dating apps for a place to stay. And I think this information could be used to advocate for better housing security for students on campus. So this was a high-level overview and takeaways from this study. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Stacy. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat or the Q&A function on Whova. Stacy, we have a question. What is sugar dating?
I'm so sorry I didn't describe that earlier. Um, Sugar dating is when a student may sign up through a website, something like Seeking Arrangement, and be paired with a wealthy older benefactor in exchange for money for tuition or rent, basic needs. That was something very popular to do years ago. Sugar dating now is approached a little differently as some of these websites are now facing some liability for these things that they've advertised. So now, if someone wants to be a sugar baby, if they want to be a college student dating someone older in exchange for money, they will typically go onto a dating app and set the age range for older and try to navigate sugar dating that way. Thank you for that question.
Stacy, we have another question in the chat. I'm so sorry if this is a very basic question, but what was your definition of sex trafficking for this?
Not a basic question at all. Students were asked, have you ever been tricked, pressured, or forced into exchanging sex acts for the promise of something else? For example, money, tuition, food, gifts, love, affection, or safety, and felt you could not get out of the situation. This was a behavioral definition adapted from a previous question on a campus climate survey. We also had some survivor input into the creation of this question.
I think we have time for the last question in the chat. Stacy, what are some resources for students experiencing sex trafficking?
Ideally, the Counseling Center and Title IX would be great resources. Um, Here at VCU, we have had a little bit more push on the police side of campus. Our police are very aware of trafficking. That is not going to be the case with everyone on campus, and so um, Title IX, those folks typically know a little bit about it as well as that counseling center. But I do think that if this is an issue on other campuses, it might be good to try to measure prevalence and make sure everyone who needs to be trained on this is trained so that they can give proper resources.
We're seeing agreement in the chat. Thank you so much, Stacy. For anyone who joined us today, the link to the evaluation is in the chat, but I'll send it again. Please, we value your feedback, share your feedback. Thank you for joining us.